So we have reached our final lesson of Chapter 8 on feminism, and if you were absent today, pretty easy way to catch up. If you simply click on this, you will see a PowerPoint and some questions related to the PowerPoint. So pretty standard issue. You've done this before, I know. So either through this video or going through the PowerPoint or emailing me or talking to your friends, however it works for you, simply get these questions answered and you will be all well and good. But let me share with you the PowerPoint I did show in class. And again, this period, 1750 to 1900, full of revolutions, and women had their own form of revolution during this time. And we started class with a brainstorm, and I asked you to think why historically women have been subjugated by men. And there's a lot of theories, and some are more modern, some are old school. Real evident one is back in our hunting and gathering days that women had to breastfeed children, which would have made it more difficult to hunt. And then some people had some more modern explanations to why this is. But again, question, why have women been second fiddle to men in a lot of places in history? What caused that to happen? And it's a hard argument to say, well, women have had an equal shake with things throughout history. That's simply not true. That's not even an opinion. That's just a falsehood. So anyway, let's further this brainstorm. Now, posing this question to you, if you had to be a woman, and some of you are female, where would be the worst place to be, when and where to be a woman, and when and where would it be best to be a female? And through this drill, consensus was it's better to be a woman now than in past history, and it's certainly better to be a woman in a democratic society versus some other forms. So we came away with those two truisms. So the first part of class was thinking, getting your brains primed, and here is the nuts and bolts of things. Now this is an important image, and it's a wonderful image in terms of telling the story. This is when women were able to vote, suffrage, the fight to vote. It's called suffrage. Now if you're noticing this world, it is pretty uniform and it's pretty recent. I see a whole lot of 19s. 19. Okay. This is 20th century. So you can see women couldn't vote in the majority of the world for a really long time. And then all of a sudden, within a few decades, women could vote. So this is a pronounced change, and this didn't happen by magic. This happened because of a fight. This happened because of a struggle and people working to get the right to vote. So anyway, let's talk about feminism. Now, when did feminism begin? Now, the dictionary defines feminism as qualities of females, okay? Now, during the 1880s, 1890s, feminism was the advocacy for equality, okay, connected with the women's movement. And the roots of feminism are earlier and best defined as identifications of common problems by women, okay? So it's a little bit of a vague term, but feminism is essentially women saying, we need to be treated better, we need equal rights, that sort of thing. But it's taken different forms throughout history. So anyway, patriarchy. Patriarchy means rule by men. And for a lot of history, societies were very patriarchal. Okay, women changed their names to the husband's name, and inheritance was passed on to sons, and positions of power in government were men. So for a lot of history and for a lot of the world, patriarchal, and women, well, you know what? It's just kind of your lot in life. You're going to be exchanged for a dowry. You're going to be essentially used as somebody who has children, okay? And, having sons is what you hoped for. So it was not a great gig to be a woman for a lot of history. I think that's safe to say. So anyway, now when patriarchy becomes law, what happened is that a lot of these governments supported patriarchy with their formal laws where women couldn't divorce. They couldn't have property. They didn't have access to education. So what happened was you have government supporting patriarchy and diminishing women with the force of law, and this happened, okay? So within the 19th century, we see some movement in women trying to have equal rights. We see it from Christian denominations, like the Quakers, for instance, and then we see it through the Enlightenment, where Enlightenment thinkers are saying, we might want to rethink this patriarchy. It's not, the way to do business. And then we have the revolution. That during the revolutions, the political revolutions we've already learned about, women had a big role in that. And after the revolutions were over, people had to reflect and say, hey, where should women fit into society? And unfortunately, they did not make the gains, in particular in the French Revolution, that they probably should have or deserved. And, it's a slow go. This women's revolution, this feminism revolution, was a slow go. Now, you take this woman, Mary Wollstonecraft. Okay, she's the mother of modern feminism. You can say her is kind of ground zero for modern feminism. And her book, Vindication of the Rights of Women, was hugely influential in getting people to think. And one of her main points is that boys and girls need to have equal access to education. Therefore, they're going to have equal access to a pretty good life. Now, in modern times, all of you get 13 years on the house. Boys, girls, 13 years paid for by the government. Now, what you do with it, some people get full rides to big-time universities and some people drop out. However, you all had the chance. And that's what Mary Wollstonecraft was saying. That's what should be happening. Okay, now, with feminism, there are these waves, okay? Now, in these waves, some debate there's a fourth wave, and that may be true. But you look at the time period, this first wave was pretty long. Second wave was about 30 years. Third wave, or fourth wave is more modern. So for the first wave, we're talking about getting the right to vote. That was what it was. And really, ground zero for the movement happened in the United States. Even though this is a world history class, the United States was where it's at. It was called Seneca Falls by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott. And this movement started here, and it was connected with the abolitionist movements, getting rid of slavery, temperance, getting rid of alcohol. So this first movement was essentially voting, okay? Voting rights. And again, in America, the black men could vote with the 15th Amendment, but it took all the way to the 19th Amendment 50 years later for women to vote. So it took 50 years from that. So the suffragettes did win eventually, but it did take a while, and there was a lot of struggles. In particular, Alice Paul on a hunger strike. You can see this poster, this propaganda poster about what women were going through. Now, in terms of second wave, I'm going to go through this quickly because this is for another unit ahead. For second wave, this feminine mystique was the modern version of Wollstonecraft's book. And it said, hey, this whole 1950s, just being chained to the kitchen and pumping out kids and being the perfect housewife, that's not going to fly. In fact, it's a little weird because if you think about it, during World War II, women proved themselves capable, very capable, of being in the factories and being in the business world and being very competent. And then when the war was over, this societal shift to, okay, cut it out and be a good housewife, that wasn't going to fly in the 60s. And then the second wave was all about equal pay for equal work. And they even tried to have an equal rights amendment in America, and it almost passed. That would have been an amendment to the Constitution to say women would have equal rights in our Constitution. Very close. And this one is probably the most important wording of this. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. And it did not pass. So in our Constitution, does not guarantee equality amongst the sexes. And then third wave is modern, third or fourth, and a lot of it is, abortion, pro-choice, it's anti-sexual harassment statutes in the workplace, the Me Too movement, and that sort of thing. But, for our purposes, I'll save that for another day. Now, here's the moral of the story. To wrap up. Women during this time period, in conjunction with the Enlightenment, in conjunction with the political revolutions, in conjunction with nationalism as you're establishing a country, women asserted themselves to say, hey, we're here, we want our equal rights. So our first wave is really about voting, getting the right to vote. And as you can see, in the 20th century, it worked. It was very, very successful. And then in the second wave was more about equality for work. Now, third wave is against sexual harassment and that sort of thing. So anyway, moral of the story, going all the way back to the beginning. A lot of revolutions during this time. Women's suffrage, the feminist movement was another one. So we are done with Chapter 8 and moving on with the Industrial Revolution tomorrow. And thank you for watching.